Welcome to Founder Stories. I'm Mike Abbott. Today with me I have Steve Garrity from Hearsay Social. Welcome, Steve.
Thanks, Mike. Excited to be here.
Thanks. And, well, let's just kick it off. Tell me a little bit about Hearsay Social, how it was created, and where you're at today.
Sure. So we started Hearsay Social about 3 years ago. Now we're about 100 people. We build enterprise software for social media management. So basically we help large companies do compliance, do marketing, and do sales on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Google+, Foursquare, all of the above.
So 0 to 100 in 3 years, and about half
Correct.
Engineering, or
just under half.
a little under half.
Yep.
And before Hearsay Social, you were at Microsoft.
Correct.
So
You hired me.
I did. That's the secret. But one of the interesting things that you did is you left a large company to go start a company.
Yep.
And let's start there. Like, tell me a little bit of that transition, what you kind of found difficult, not as difficult as people perceive it to be, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think to start with, the level of ambiguity you deal with when you leave and start your own thing was pretty amazing, right? So you always kind of think about, oh, there's all this risk, and Microsoft's doing stuff quickly and changing things, and everybody says, hey, you're really good at dealing with ambiguity, and then you actually get into a real ambiguous situation and you have no idea what's going on. I always joked when we started the company, we woke up in the morning and your goal was to start a business. You could start a hot dog stand and theoretically satisfy your goal, and clearly not what we're doing. So going out and saying, hey, everything is in play now. There's no system, there's no structure, actually makes figuring out what you're doing, and I guess more importantly, what you're not doing, really hard, really important, and actually really fun.
So like along that path, what did you find kind of helpful or not helpful to kind of weave through that ambiguity?
So I think a lot of the stuff you got from Microsoft made the basics really easy. So figuring out how to ship a product, right? That's actually really easy when you've been in a big company that's big at it, or sorry, good at it, right? So you know the kind of mechanics of, I'm going to go figure out what I'm building, and I'm going to go build it and ship it and get feedback and the whole iterative process. Not that Microsoft's known for it, but it actually is quite good at it, and it becomes very easy. Thought the interesting parts of it were more figuring out, how do you build an enterprise sales force? Right? How do you build a kind of big marketing machine when you have no brand to work with? How do you even get into places when you're not calling and saying, hi, this is Steve from Microsoft? Everybody takes that phone call. When it's, hi, this is Steve from Hearsay Social. From who? You've got a lot to figure out.
Yeah, that's a great point. Now, one of the things that I know you've experienced hiring, and I know I've seen myself as well, is when you're at the earlier stages of those companies, especially like 0 to 20, even 0 to 40, you look at someone from a larger company, like a Microsoft or even a Google, and you go, are they going to be able to adjust to this smaller team environment? I'd love to hear kind of what have you experienced and seen with some of the folks you brought in?
It's really tough. So far we've been, I think, lucky, maybe good, and gotten it right. We've brought in a number of people from Microsoft, from IBM, from Google, and it's all worked quite well. The thing I always look for is, what were they doing at Microsoft? In a way, how long have they been there? And a lot about kind of their temperament, right? So the people that we've hired that have done quite well have come from relatively small teams in the company and teams that are outside of kind of the main span of control, right? We haven't hired anybody from Office. Nothing against Office, but not the most...
Yeah, so it would be fair to say kind of not rogue, but like the people on the edges versus the mainstream shipping effort.
The people that are kind of out on the edges and are able to do a little more of their own thing. Office is shipped the way it's shipped for 20 years, and it's quite good at it. And it's very reliable, right? But that's not what you need in a startup. You need somebody who can adjust to a lot of change and unpredictability. So we've hired people from the System Center team. That's like a relatively small team from mobile and mobile search, where they just kind of were off, and actually that's where I came from. Very little budget, very little oversight, just kind of, hey, go try to get this thing done and see what happens. We've hired people from some parts of search, but always kind of the search labs type stuff, where there really isn't a lot of guidance. Again, nobody from Windows, right? Nobody from Visual Studio. Great organizations, just not the same level of craziness.
Same creativity. Yeah. Now, I mean, you came down here from Seattle and partnered up with Clara to go start. You guys didn't go through an incubator necessarily.
Nope.
How was it kind of getting really within this community and environment here in the Bay Area as an entrepreneur?
It's interesting, right? We got really lucky. So I met Clara in college. We were freshmen together at Stanford, and we'd been good friends for now 12 or 14 years. And we'd always talked about starting a company together. And as part of it, going through college, we'd started to make some of those connections, right? Stanford Computer Science, it's the Valley, you're meeting entrepreneurs. We'd interned at startups. So we had something of a network. Clara had actually stayed here at Google and Salesforce, and she had done obviously a ton of incredible work with people here, and it was always more outward facing. So she already had a pretty solid network. I'd come back a lot when I was in Seattle to stay in touch with people. So I'd fly down on the weekends and hang out with founders and VCs and devs and anybody I wanted to hang out with and kind of build it. Once we got back in, it was remarkably easy to do it when you didn't focus on it. Right? When you just sat down and built something that started to be interesting, it's amazing how many people you just meet, right? You don't go out and try to network, you're just doing your job, and it becomes quite easy to go meet really cool people. And they kind of respect what you've done as opposed to the fact that you're trying to meet them.
That's fair. So as you kind of grew the company, I know that for a period of time you were wearing a lot of different hats.
Right.
Still probably are. But in terms of running engineering, kind of even being a sales engineer arguably out in the field, and then hiring a VP of engineering, one of the things that I know obviously you've gone through, I've certainly seen as well, is when you're that founder and you're running engineering, and you give that up to someone else, like how do you step back, and what kind of learnings, like how did that go for you, and what were kind of some of the key takeaways?
Yeah, it's been a really interesting process. We brought in Jeremy to run our engineering group 6 or 9 months ago. Great guy. We interviewed for probably 6 to 12 months to find that person, right? We went through a lot of people, and finding somebody that fit with the team was really tough, right? Not tough, really, it was hard, right? Not a lot of good engineering leaders out there, and we have a pretty strong engineering culture by design, right? I think it's a really positive thing, but it doesn't put up with a lot of things. And so finding somebody that the team liked was hard. One of the things we did is every single engineer on the team, which at that point was probably 12, maybe 15 people, interviewed all the finalists. And so by the time we brought somebody in, everybody had actually
kind of involved and bought into.
Yeah. The second thing we did that I'd love to claim was intentional, but it probably wasn't, was I waited far too long to do this. And so by the time it was time to do it, the whole team desperately wanted it. So rather than it being my decision saying, hey guys, we're going to get a VP Eng, it was everybody saying, hey, you're on the road 4 days a week. You're doing 18 other things. We want somebody we can hang out with more often, right? We need some help. We need some guidance. And I said, okay, great. We'll go get that person. But I waited long enough that people, it was almost organic. It was a pull, and people really wanted it, rather than saying, hey, trust me, you're going to like this down the road. So there was very little of me forcing it, and a lot more of people actually asking for it.
And was it unanimous for this candidate?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, everybody was super psyched about this.
Because once in a while, you have a scenario where let's say 75% or 90%, right? But the other 10% are some of your really key engineers, and so you're stuck with this position of, what do I do?
Right. And we didn't have it in this case. We've had it in other cases. And that one, it's obviously a trade-off. How important are those engineers, and how badly do they hate it? And I think we probably had people here who were more and less sold on the idea. Ideally, if you've got enough respect kind of from the team and with the team, they'll trust you on some decisions where you kind of say, hey, I know this isn't apparent yet, but...
You have to earn it. I mean, I think it's... I've certainly seen that, personally seen this with people I brought in. I mean, people need to be able to come in and listen and actually fit into the organization and then grow it versus come in with the hammer.
And that's been one of the things we really looked for in this person, but also something that Jeremy's done a fantastic job doing as he came in, is come in, don't change everything the first day, right? Nothing's broken. It's actually working quite well. But your job is to scale it. Your job, and I always tease him, his real job is, like VP of Developer Happiness, right? And it's keep the engine stream humming. Like, it's going well. It doesn't need to be fixed. It needs to be nurtured. And so he did a great job of coming in and listening to the key, everybody, the key engineers, the newest engineers, and saying, hey, so how can I help? What can I do to improve things? I don't see anything wrong right now. What can I do? There's plenty of things wrong, but he didn't come in and criticize, right? What can I do to make things better?
As you guys built up the sales organization, because you guys are doing quite well, how have you kind of balanced the engineering aspect with sales? Because that's oftentimes when you add in sales, certainly saw this at Composite, saw this at Twitter, it's like a new dimension to the company. And I'd love to hear kind of how that worked for you guys and what worked and didn't work.
It's been really interesting. It's definitely a huge change. It's something that from a bigger company, you're both kind of used to, in the sense that Microsoft provided a great learning ground for figuring out obviously how enterprise sales works. And so now at Hearsay Social, we've got all this DNA from big companies, and we've brought in people from Fortify and HP and MarkLogic and all of Google, a bunch of the Google enterprise folks. It provided a great way to kind of get some enterprise culture and understand what that meant. it is a very interesting culture shift when you have people in the field and in front of customers every day.
Yeah, especially in the environment on the enterprise side where the engineer may not know what he or she's actually selling.
Right.
So if you have that gap between selling and what you're building, that can cause a lot of anxiety, obviously.
One of the things that I think we've actually done quite well has been to connect engineering and sales very closely. So we send engineers into the field basically every week.
It's a great idea.
And I think, our customers really appreciate it because they end up getting to meet the engineering team, they get to give direct feedback, they get an explanation of why things are the way they are, right? Maybe it doesn't make sense, but here's what happened to get us here, and here's what we're doing to change it going forward. We get a lot more trust out of customers kind of when we actually just expose, it's transparency, right?
And actually on the other side of the equation, you have the engineer actually really understand how is the customer actually using the product.
Exactly.
Yeah.
On the flip side, it means that you actually, you need less in terms of product management because the engineers manage the product. They know what they should build. And it's great to walk around the office and hear these conversations of, oh, so-and-so from this customer would really appreciate it if we did this thing, but this other customer is going to not like it because they want this thing to happen instead. And you get engineers getting into these trade-off discussions because they've actually sat down.
Yeah. With them and say, well, hey, they sell this. So kind of switching gears a bit, one of the things that oftentimes is like overlooked or not always prioritized when you're building a company is really investing in internal tools.
Right.
And I know, I can remember when you were hacking actually in Sequoia's offices, when you had tools from like the earliest days. So I'd love to hear about, what did you build at those earliest days on the tooling side?
Yep.
How's that grown and how should the audience kind of think about that investment?
I guess I can't say enough about automating. Right, and we joke about we'll automate everything if we have to do it once, right? There's a great, do you read XKCD? It's a great XKCD cartoon that we have posted around the office. That's sitting at a table and the guy says, hey, can you pass me the salt? And then the middle frame, there's nothing happening, and the guy says again, hey, can you pass me the salt? What's it taking so long? And the guy says, oh, don't worry about it. I'm building an arbitrary system for passing condiments. It'll be faster in the long run. And we kind of take this to heart and say, hey, it really, you slow down at the beginning to speed up later. So we built, one of the first tools we built, obviously we did automated deployment systems, right? And we run in a very rapid deployment mode, right? Given that we interface with the social network so often, we deploy a lot, we work with them a lot on what's coming out, new features. Automated deployment was huge. Continuous integration, right? I don't know how you could run anything without it today. Test suites just run all the time. The part that we did that I think it was different and worked really well was a lot of our tooling for tracking how people are doing things and what they're working on. So integration between, we use Pivotal Tracker, and we now just switched to Trello for our work item management system. Integrated into GitHub for pull requests. Integrated into what we call our PR bot, which actually runs all of our unit tests, and will actually basically fake deploy our code every time we ship a change. So when I go make a change, new feature, it'll actually get stood up on a virtual host, full environment of the system that people can go click through before it ever gets merged.
Yeah, a quick functional run through.
Yeah, and you can actually, so if you're making UI changes, you can actually pop open your IE7 browser and go look at this code before it gets shipped. Sorry, obviously before it gets shipped, before it ever gets integrated.
So just pausing there, at what stage did you actually invest to build that tool? Because I mean, that's a very comprehensive tool, which is awesome, and enables you to move really quickly. But like, at what stage did you guys build that?
We did that one once we started talking about it, probably about 5 engineers, because there was enough stuff that you couldn't interact. So when you had 2 or 3 people, you could always just say, hey, look at my dev site, right? I'm building it locally, just come check out my laptop. When we got to 5 or 6, it started to be, oh, that person's in an interview. That person is doing something else. I want to switch contexts and do something else on my local site, so I'm going to not be able to show that to them anymore. So I went another place to put it. By the time we got to 8 or 9 and we hadn't built it yet, we just sat down one night and hacked it out. The first version was quite ghetto, and it just kind of barely did it, but it didn't even clean up after itself, right? You had to go delete the files later every month.
And people kind of added.
And then people just kept adding. We had a great intern this summer. We actually made it an intern project to come in and rebuild it using all push notifications from GitHub and a bunch of other things. In fact, it's on our list to open source one of these days.
It's a great intern project.
It was a really good intern project, and it was a fantastic intern to do the work. So,
do you have interns coming in this summer?
We aren't set up with them yet. We have a couple that we're trying to get back. I know of at least one, but we'll hire probably 3 or 4 more.
Interesting. The reason why I ask is sometimes it's always a challenge when you start building that intern program as a startup.
Right.
And sometimes it's just through luck that you get an intern, and other times it's a little more we'll say intentional.
Yeah.
Where's your head at? Are you guys at the stage where you're starting to invest more in interns, or how do you think about that?
Ours is still mostly on the luck
Yeah.
system. We've had them for 3 years now, so we've had a lot, but they've always been referral based.
Yep.
So the first 2 years, it was individual people that we met, some through Sequoia, some through, I think maybe one through, I wasn't through any A yet, one through a professor at Stanford, who said, hey, this is a great kid in a class of mine, you should go recruit, right? And so that's helped us identify really top talent. Most recently it was Mayfield Fellows program. So both Clara and I did the Mayfield Fellows program at Stanford. And it's 12 students every year from engineering backgrounds and go to entrepreneurship stuff. We went and got 3 of them, phenomenal people. And they came in and just, I mean, when they left, everybody's kind of like, what?
Yeah.
Where are they going?
Yeah. Yeah, referrals. Like, I mean,
It's all
obviously the same
referrals.
applies at engineers as interns. But
Yeah.
Steve, thank you for coming in today.
No
really
problem.
appreciate your time, and thank you all for watching Founder Stories.